All right. We'll get started here in just a moment. I'm going to share the link here and get some more people here in the room. And we have quite a bit to talk about. Doot, 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 doot. All righty. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Disqualification Show after Kansas. Just finishing the 400-mile race here on Mother's Day weekend. Happy Mother's Day to all of you out there. Wait till we get a few more people here in, and we'll go ahead and get rolling here. So let's take a whoop. Hang on. Did we lose the feed here? Saw that disappear right quick. Let's make sure we're still on board. Looks like we are. Excellent. So looks like Keselowski, did jump the restart there at the end. I know that's going to be it's an unfortunate thing at the end there, but looked like he was having a really good car there. He had a really good lead on the 88. They're able to jump past Alex Bowman, and unfortunate for him, but you got to say, I mean, Alex Bowman, a fantastic run for him. 3 weeks in a row now, 3 second-place finishes in a row, getting up there, and good to see him. He's knocking on the door at exactly the right time. So the only DNF, Matt DiBenedetto, your only DNF in the race tonight. The number 95 blowing up at the end and setting up that final sprint to the finish. However, Cody Ware, unofficially your last place finisher. He finished last earlier this year at Martinsville after some brake issues at the beginning of the race that sent him to the back. But now we have a second last place run for him. The first time that a last place finisher at Kansas finished last while still under power and not falling out for any reason. So some significant things there. Good gutsy effort by the Rick Ware team tonight. Unfortunately for them, having mechanical issues there, handling specifically. It sounded like they had a real problem in the rear end of the car, causing him to get loose several times. They finally pulled him into the garage area, spent about 15 laps there in the garage area, and ultimately closed within about 11 laps of the 39th place runner, but ultimately at the end of the race could not close the gap any further and is still your last place finisher here at Kansas for this week. So that'll be your article for this week here. Taking a look at everything else. Really got to say, the aero package again having a good showing this time around. Bowman kind of predicted, it seemed in his interview, that this was going to be the race where the package was really going to have a little bit better of a showing, even better than Las Vegas or Texas or Atlanta that we'd seen prior to this. So I'd say pretty solid start to it so far. Let's take a look at everything else here from the race results, and we'll get this pulled up. But got a feel for Bowman, though. But he's just knocking on the door at this moment, and that's kind of been the theme of this weekend. When we're going to talk about the truck race, of course, and Ross Chastain, your winner in that. Very similar story in that sense. Bowman leading 63 laps. Gets passed by Keselowski towards the end, right before that caution. Cody Ware figured a little bit prominently in that part of the end of the race there. Had a situation where 51 was being alerted by his spotter with 7 laps to go to pull to the inside. And certainly at the front stretch there, it's just the worst place you could catch lap traffic, since so many of the leaders were running at or below the line there coming to the stripe. It just set up a difficult situation for anybody to get through. But with the 51 having problems with handling and everything, still keeping the race tight, and then the caution ended up presenting an opportunity again for Bowman to actually challenge for the lead once more. So, but almost having a weekend of first-time winners in the series. But a great run for Alex Bowman, great run for Eric Jones. I know Clint Boyer is not too happy about that. Boyer and Bowman tangling towards the end there, and Boyer just backing off to make sure that Eric Jones didn't get spun in the middle of the pack there, and Boyer dropping back a bit. I'm reminded about what happened with Boyer back at the Daytona 500 a couple months ago, him and Michael McDowell on the back straightaway, and McDowell having a very similar situation where he's going for the best run that he can and not leaving any room for the 14 to come up in front of him and try to block his way. Boyer ends up wrecking, and McDowell ends up getting a top 5. This one, the roles reversed a little bit, where Eric Jones was in position to just throw the block on the 14, and Boyer let him in, and that ultimately cost Boyer several spots there at the end. Have to also talk about Tyler Reddick making just his second Cup start of the season, driving the number 31 car. We last saw him back at the Daytona 500. Fantastic run for him, really showing the way for the Richard Childress bunch, finishing in the 9th position, running as high as the top 5 during that late stretch there through a little bit of pit strategy, and finishing 9th in the race there, the number 31. So a great run for the defending Xfinity Series champion, and taking the full advantage of an off week for the Xfinity Series to get a good run. So certainly looking ahead to what may be coming up for the 31 team and for Reddick as well. Chris Buescher had a fantastic run through this entire race here, running in the top 5 for most of it, running about 7th or 8th towards the end, and ultimately finishing 10th in the race. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. challenging for the lead in the Sunny D car, still hasn't won in that paint scheme yet. 5th third car seems to be the best car that he has. Finished just outside the top 10 unofficially in the 11th position. Both of the big names in the field there, Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch, ended up finishing outside the top 10. Kevin Harvick, your defending winner of the spring race, finishing in the 13th spot. And Kyle Busch, after coming back from a penalty for running through too many pit boxes, which, contrary to what he said, has actually caught up quite a few drivers over the last season or so, ultimately sees the end of his consecutive top 10 streak for this season after getting 11 of them in a row and tying Morgan Shepherd's streak from 1990. Much like Shepherd, he ends up having problems in the last few laps and finishes in the 30th position, getting a little bit of fender damage there after running into, I believe it was Boyer there on the apron, and finishing 3 laps down in the 30th spot. And so a rough deal there for the number 18 and for Kyle Busch. But Morgan Shepherd still has the record, at least is now tied with Kyle Busch on that, and it should be interesting seeing what's going on with that. So let's see. But yeah, Alex Bowman really trying to get something very good. I mean, he was certainly the big story here from the Cup race. As I mentioned on Twitter, he just finished last in this very same race for Tommy Baldwin Racing just 4 years ago. And driving the number 7 car, that was the 3rd last place finish of his career. He had a vibration that eliminated him after 125 laps. Bowman was actually challenging for the last car championship that year, was edged by Landon Castle down the stretch. What a difference that this has made, him getting this opportunity, driving Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s car, getting the full-time ride at Hendrick. And we're continuing to see him having these good runs here, although we hadn't seen much of him after the front row start of the Daytona 500 until just back at Talladega. But it's amazing. Usually we see so many times a underdog driver or a driver not really that competitive out there get a good run at a plate race, and then that's it. They go back to a downforce track and they're not as good again. But Dover is not an easy track at all to get a good run at, like we talked about last week. And he still gets a 2nd place finish there. And then a very different set of circumstances this week, finishing 2nd in this one. He's really turned things around. And given what he did at the All-Star race last year, especially, again, winning in the very first stage in the Open, it should be interesting to see what he does in the Open in the 600 and going forward from there. So we'll see what happens on that. Very exciting on that. Let's take a look here. So, Brad Keselowski, your race winner, unofficially again. Cody Ware, your last place finisher. And we take another look. I'm just looking up the standings here as to where that cycles things through. That's going to put Cody Ware in a tie for 2nd with Kyle Larson for the standings there. Michael McDowell, still your leader of the 2019 NASCAR Cup Series Championship with 3 last place finishes. Ware's 2nd of this year. He'll have the tiebreaker against Kyle Larson at a streak of 7-2. And that is going to give Cody Ware the sole position of the 2nd spot there in the Cup Series standings. Again, pending what we are now waiting for now, the results of technical inspection. And of course, technical inspection became the big story in the first part of this race today, as has become a frustrating trend in spite of the return of single car qualifying. We've now had a situation where several cars are getting sent to the rear of the field for technical situations there. We saw most of the top 10 sent to the rear of the field, including a lot of the teams at the back of the field. Both the number 46 and 66 from Motorsports Business Management sent to the back where they had already been. But a lot of them making their way to the front of the field there. Chase Elliott finishing in the 4th spot there, having a great run. Jimmy Johnson looked like he had maybe something going there, but still finishing in 6th. Let's take another look here. Joey Gase did not finish last in the return of the number 46. We talk about that for the Motorsports Business Management team. Carl Long's effort returning to a 2-car operation, or returning to it, actually running 2 Cup cars for the very first time. Bringing back the number 46, which again, almost exactly 10 years ago this weekend, was when Carl Long had that penalty driving number 46 in the Winston Open, or I guess it was the Sprint Showdown at that time when Sprint was a title sponsor. And engine failure in practice that forced him to the back after he was given the random draw for the outside pole in the showdown when qualifying was rained out. Long started the race in the back, crunched the nose of the car, blew up the other engine, and ended up finishing last. About the worst possible run you could possibly get in the Open. And yet, the controversial issue with the Evernham prepared engine in the number 46, supposedly a little bit too large, may have been because the engine was old, because it's old equipment. Long certainly had no idea of it, at least that's what was talked about there, and ultimately led to a terrible penalty that ended up costing Carl Long his original team and shutting down his operation. What was unfortunate, on top of all of this, I seem to remember back in 2009, Long was doing a big celebration of his racing career up until that point, while the Romeo Guest Construction Company was sponsoring the number 46. That was a backer that he had from his early racing days, and the green and yellow paint scheme was a throwback to that as well. And much like we saw with Jeremy Mayfield earlier that year, just completely wiped both a driver and a team right out of the sport. And Long has worked a very long time, quite honestly, since then to really get back in there, being a start and park driver in the Xfinity Series, working with Derek White over at Motorsports Business Management, ultimately taking over for White after he had his own controversy a couple of years ago. And Long now building up this effort, running multiple cars in the Xfinity Series, getting back into the Cup Series a couple of years ago in this race at Kansas, and now running 2 cars there. So a good time for him to do it by making at least one attempt with 46. That should be able to get that team into the Open next week if they so choose. And I'm sure looking to get the very best amount of income they can from the 600 going forward from there. I would expect seeing both cars on those lists, although I don't know that one way or the other. Should be very interesting to see. So, yeah, exactly. Talking about where Bowman's going to break through, I think it does seem a matter of, where, not if. So that's going to be the big question going ahead. And trying to find out what happens with the 88 car and when they're going to find their way back to victory lane. Let's take another look here. So, looking further back, again, Matt Benedetto, his engine trouble there at the end of the race. He just expressed his dismay over that on Twitter here not long ago, talking about just the terrible luck that number 95 has had here. Let me just read off this tweet just 4 minutes ago from Alex Bowman on the page here. I've never wanted something so bad. Not going to lie, this one hurts. My team has worked like crazy, though, to get us to where we're at. And I'm proud of what we've done, going to keep after it to get that win we deserve. So that the words from Alex Bowman 4 minutes ago. Already 545 likes on that one, so he should be definitely one to watch going forward. Let's take another look further back here. So we talked about the Motorsports Business Management team. Landon Castle finishing in the 37th spot. Looked like he was off the pace there towards the end. He was 10 laps down at the finish. Matt Benedetto ended up being 9 laps down in the garage area after his issues, slipped all the way to 36th, just on the very edge of the bottom 5. We've had our first 40-car field in quite some time, and we're able to get those cars out there. Reed Sorensen outside the bottom 5. Quinn Huff, Bailey Curry, Ryan Blaney, and Ross Chastain rounding out your bottom 10. Chastain, of course, the big story from yesterday's race, and of course we'll talk about that again a little bit more here. Let's see. So yeah, big winner this weekend as well. I mean, not just Brad Keselowski and yesterday from Ross Chastain, but Morgan Shepherd as well. Shepherd gets to not only um, keep his streak going, but he has this top 10 streak at least equaled by Kyle Busch last week. But he does not lose the record to Kyle Busch, so that's kind of interesting in a sense. There, just shows how difficult that was and how remarkable of a start of season that Shepherd had in that time of his career. Interestingly, if I remember correctly, I think the only race he won that year was the very last race of the season in Atlanta, which was the one where Michael Rich was tragically killed on pit road after Ricky Rudd spun out during a late green flag stop, which is what ultimately led to the institution of pit road speed limits, rather. Excuse me. Let's take a look. And so unfortunate, Bubba Wallace finished the 29th spot. I know this has been chronicled. I believe Jeff Gluck was mentioning it the other day just how emotional that young man's been here this year with all the difficulties that both he and that team have been facing this year. Certainly looking to turn things around for the number 43 team. But good qualifying run, improved somewhat when they had a number of these cars sent to the rear of the field prior to the start. But finishing the 29th position there, again, another difficult run and long night for him. Let's see. Again, we're checking the results once more here. And we'll take another look back here. Yep, exactly. Yeah, the ridiculous pit rules for the first part of 1991. They needed some serious visual aids to kind of fix all that up or figure out what was happening. Let's take another look here. Looking at the clip of Clint Boyer confronting Eric Jones in his car there on pit road. I want to pull up the rest of this here in the meantime. The Paul Menard seemed to figure prominently in the race tonight. We saw a lot of shots of that 21 there and being bounced around out there, or he got run over by Kyle Busch at one point, and I'm amazed that both of them were able to keep it straight. Seems like the slam drafting has stayed a trend here in the Cup Series or in the mile-and-a-half tracks, even with the new aero package. I'll turn on the fan here. It's getting a little warm in here. Let me take a look. So, yeah, difficult situation for the 43 team. We'll see if they can turn things around. Perhaps a short race like we have in the upcoming showdown. Maybe that'll be a good chance for the 43 to maybe get a good showing in that. If you could win one of those stages and somehow transfer in, or maybe a fan vote thing on top of that, that'd be one thing that would be interesting going forward. But I think, certainly a good run at a points race would be helpful for him. It's going to be a challenging stretch of races coming up there with not only the 600, which really seems to expose any vulnerabilities in any team or especially their technical equipment, but also just teams having a difficult year seem to have an even harder year in the 600. But then you get that stretch heading into Sonoma next month, and get some very difficult tracks in there as well. You get Pocono and Michigan and so forth. Let me take a look back. But I have to agree. Very pleased with how the race went. I think it was very engaging throughout. There were a couple parts there where it did get strung out a bit, and I think there were definitely some questions about if the package could be good for more than just a few laps. But how much of that was a consequence of the number of cautions we had in the middle to late stages of the race, and how much of that was really the package actually helping out. It could be argued, but then again, you remember in last year's race, I know certainly falling from the back of the field, we had a very similar situation where nobody was falling out of the race, that you had multiple people that were multiple laps down. And but then in the very last part of the race, you had a lot of accidents, a lot of close action there, and it kind of turned the race on its head and ended up bringing Ty Dillon into the last spot in that one. This one a little bit different. What I think is most compelling about this is that we had a very competitive aero package, but not a lot of accidents and not a lot. You had some people with tire failures, but not like multi-car pileups or anything like that. And I think that's the most encouraging thing to take from this going forward. I know last year in the All-Star race, that was a big thing there where they had a lot of competition when they first rolled out this particular package. at least in the Cup Series. It made it really interesting there. I think that's the biggest thing to go forward, because you kind of get caution fatigue after a while, because you start to have situations where the racing is just, it's very competitive, but at the same time you have large drivers just running over each other, and you're just anxious for the next restart. If you have good green flag racing, I think that's a better measure of actually if the package is any good. So yeah. I didn't hear anything about STP leaving Richard Petty Motorsports. I know Click and Close did, but that would be an unfortunate revelation if they actually left the program there. Certainly a lot of the struggles that they've been facing in the meantime. But yeah, good to see that. Yeah, good to see both the Carl Long cars out there. I know he is stretching it. I agree that he's stretching him very, very thin right now with all those Xfinity cars, and then running 2 Cup cars in there. It seems like they're just throwing everything out there. But it takes a lot of these teams to do the very best they can to get as many cars out there. To answer your question, so Rickelstein, we're about 30 minutes into the wait for inspection results. I'd expect results probably it could be any time in the next hour, maybe thereabouts, maybe a little bit less than that, depending on how things go. I think the reason we're not seeing any disqualifications so far, I mean, you don't really pull for disqualification, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on for when you're waiting for the actual outcome of the race. This is that we're getting so many of these drivers caught before the race starts, and they seem to be significant enough infractions they're sending people to the back of the field. So perhaps they're any kind of thing that they throw into the car, it's getting caught originally, and then it's not having a factor there. But I wouldn't rule it out completely. I've had a theory that perhaps we're not going to see that until Sears Point this year, and I think that's going to be the interesting part. Because at the road courses, what's different there is that you have a lot of these teams, especially the smaller teams, that run older chassis, or one chassis that's just specifically reserved for road courses and nowhere else, because you're just going to run it 2 or 3 times a year now. That would be my guess of maybe a possibility for things to change up, but I'm not sure what's going to happen on that end. Let's see. So I want to run over this here in the meantime and just kind of run through what we have here. Absolutely have to make sure I mention this as well, and this was talked about, of course. Keselowski mentioned this, of course, in his post-race interview. Of course, condolences to the family of Mike Mittler, who passed away just yesterday before the Truck Series race. We talked about this a bit yesterday, and a lot of these other competitors have as well. Mike Mittler was absolutely instrumental in getting so many teams started, because he had been active as basically a single truck owner in the Truck Series right from the beginning of the series in 1995. And, had run with many drivers, Jimmy McMurray getting his start out there, Carl Edwards, Brad Keselowski made words about him as well. Justin Allgaier, so many other competitors have driven either as the number 26 or much later the number 63 that have been run more recently. A team that doesn't really get talked about too much for how much they've accomplished with so little. The Truck Series still has very much that spirit of a lot of these owner drivers or independent operations or underfunded efforts. Seeing the number 63 out there have a good run from time to time, it's always a great story. Perhaps none greater than Bobby Pierce's runs at Eldora when that track added on the circuit. You always think back to Norm Benning having a great run in the last chance qualifier to qualify for the race, but then the race itself, you think about Bobby Pierce winning the pole for the 63 and ultimately giving what was Mike Mittler's only top 5 in the series from all those years. I believe they said it was 301 combined starts among the different drivers that ran for him. A fantastic run for him, very close to coming to victory lane. But the competition at the end always steps up for sure. Very close calls there for Pierce there a couple of times. He had the truck kind of fall to pieces at one point, and then another time where he had stalled at the infield there, and Kenny Wallace trying to urge the crew to get the truck back out there and trying to talk with the crews working at the truck there. I mean, so many close calls, but so many times that the 63 has been out there and been a big figure, and certainly Mittler is going to be missed. You think about Junie Donlavey in the Cup Series as a team owner that was very much there to bring as many of these new stars out there and give them a chance out there in a national competition, even with the limited resources they had, getting the very best run that they could. And that's something that, again, there are some teams like that in the Truck Series now. DJ Kopp actually is still operating the 63 team. And despite rumors that I've heard about the 63 team shutting down, I was assured by Kopp himself in a couple of communications that that team is still operating, but definitely on a part-time basis and being very selective about which races they enter. I believe one of the last times we saw them was at Las Vegas when Scott Stenzel finished last. They talked about having a one-man band in that group and a very lean funding on that effort. But they're looking to some other races later on this year. I'm not sure where exactly. We'll see what happens at Charlotte and the rest of the season going ahead. But you always want to see as many of those teams out there, compete as best they can. I know we just saw the 63 out there at Phoenix just last year with Jesse Wuji swapped in at the last second. I know that was a boon to that team because he seems like he has a lot of really faithful backers out there to help fund any effort that he's able to sign with. But that was really the big thing with that. But then to follow that up, I mean, we had the tragedy of that, and then to round out that evening with the run with Ross Chastain there. I mean, a fantastic run for him. I mean, you think about struggles that Chastain's faced since last year. Trying to get up through the ranks, underfunded efforts in the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, driving for Johnny Davis now as he has for so many of those years. Excuse me. But then still having a situation where he's trying to get the very most out of his equipment there. The watermelon farmer out there did good on last night, and more than good. He drove out there, was right there when he needed to be when the 52 ran out of fuel. Stuart Friesen, again, we talk about Alex Bowman having so many close calls and not winning in the Cup Series, especially in the last few weeks. Stuart Friesen continuing his streak of second place finishes in the series. So many, I believe he's at 5 or 6 at this point. Had a 4-tire stop at the end of the race there, only took 2 tires. They didn't get the second can of fuel in, and that ended up spelling the difference because Chastain was worrying the heck out of him at the end of the race, forced him to dry out the fuel tank, ran out of fuel with 3 laps to go. And Chastain, who had been closing and then pulling back within about between 0.2 and 0.5 for several laps, ended up taking the lead back and ended up pulling off the victory. So a really good, really tight battle there at the end of the race there, and couldn't be happier for Chastain there. I mean, it's unfortunate for Stuart Friesen, but Chastain losing the ride with Chip Ganassi after the DC Solar bankruptcy and the investigation that's, I suppose, is still going on with DC Solar since then. Ultimately shutting down Chip Ganassi's Xfinity Series program is going to be his full season effort. And since then, we've seen Chastain in every Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series race this year. I wonder when, if ever, that streak's ever going to end, because quite honestly, it's going to get to a point where you get some of these races that are miles apart. It could actually be Sonoma, the Sonoma Raceway there, although we've seen Premium Motorsports put in road course ringers on the road courses. We had Justin Marks, I believe, run the 15 just last year. I don't know if that's going to be the situation again this June. It would be interesting to see Chastain get a chance at Sears Point, because I don't believe he's made a Cup start out there. But if they're going to be juggling an Xfinity race or a Truck Series race that weekend, that could be a real challenge there. I think that's going to be interesting looking ahead. Let's see. Yeah, 3 more starts for Garrett Smithley and the Spire team. That would be interesting. So, yeah, I mean, it looks like, again, we talk, and it's actually good to bring up Spire Motorsports. It seems like they're doing a kind of thing with pay drivers or drivers to, still getting their legs under them in the series. Good to see Quinn Houff and these other guys actually get some experience. They actually got some good sponsorship too. That oil fire sponsor on the 77 looked really cool. So good deal for them. Greg Galding looked to do 10 more Cup races this year for Rick Ware. I haven't heard anything on that, but that would be good to see. Galding in the Xfinity Series is, again, we talked about it in past episodes of this, how much of a great story that's been this year. Driving the number 08, most recently his runner-up finish at Talladega, and then being in the Dash for Cash at Dover. we'll see what happens coming up on that. Yeah, an unfortunate situation there for that real deal there. Let's see. Let's take another look at everything else for the Cup Series results. Has this been refreshed yet? Okay, no, they haven't refreshed it with a list of reasons out. I'm sure it's going to show an engine failure for the 95, but I don't believe anybody else was a DNF. I closed up the scanner thing here towards the end, so I didn't see if anybody else pulled off the track there at the end, but it looks by the 26 laps down that Ware was still on the track there at the finish. And again, that would be the first time that a Cup Series driver has finished last, but still finished under power in a Kansas race, although we were very close to that last year in very similar circumstances with Timmy Hill in the 66. Let me take another look at the Xfinity Series results here, or not Xfinity, the Truck Series results. Xfinity Series coming back in a couple of weeks here when they go back to Charlotte. So again, Ross Chastain, a fantastic run. The Al Neese team, just in a couple of years into its own existence, had never finished inside the top 10 and before this year, I believe. No, they hadn't in their first season. They weren't really features on the NASCAR that much other than their preview articles. They seem to avoid last place runs pretty consistently. But not really being a factor in the finish so much. I know that Austin Wayne self had a good run at Las Vegas once when he was driving for him. But other than that, it seemed like they're really struggling. But this year, Chastain has been picking up stage wins and just getting closer and closer. And this time he would just not be denied. So a fantastic run for him. His first Truck Series victory after having run in the series since back in 2011. Long time in the series there. Still staying in the Xfinity Series and Cup as we talked about, running all three series the rest of this year. Ben Rhodes in the second spot. But we look further back at Joey Gase, your last place finisher. We talked about this on Twitter last night. Ended up being a first-time reason that a driver fell out. And this is very rare these days, although we had a little bit of an issue with that at Dover, where we talked about the damaged vehicle policy and then a driver being flagged off for being too slow, track bar issues. I mean, well, actually, now I'm thinking about a couple examples where it isn't so rare. But we had the roof hatch issue for Brad Keselowski at Daytona. So we're seeing some unusual ones here, but a chassis issue for Joey Gase, and more accurately, an issue where the number 10 had been backed into the outside wall. Jennifer Jo Cobb facing some adversity early in the week when she backed into the wall, damaged the rear clip of the truck. They managed to just tape it up and get the truck back out there, very similar to what Cobb had been able to do at Gateway in 2017. They got the 10 truck out there. Gase had already been brought on board as one of the several late entries to get the field from a very minimum of 27 trucks up to 30 trucks. Gase was going to be driving the number 0, set to be a start and park entry, and Cobb was going to run the full race on the number 10. Of course, once the damage occurred, so they didn't want to risk running a damaged truck at a high downforce track like Kansas. So there was a driver swap there. Cobb drove into the number the number single 0, and Joey Gase in the number 10. Gase pulling off the track at the very beginning of the race, and again listed out with chassis issues, although more accurately, a damaged vehicle and just issues with that. And Cobb finishing in the 23rd position, and Gase's number 0 out with suspension issues late in the race, about midway through the race actually. We saw other drivers that were filling the field there. TJ Bell driving another Al Neese car, a teammate to Ross Chastain, 38 truck being a part-time effort that we've seen at the dirt tracks and so forth. Joe Nemechek bringing the number 87 back out with Timmy Hill. And we had only 8 laps into the race for the number 87. He actually qualified the truck at the 22nd spot in the race, but the 87 ended up falling out of the event there very early on. Bailey Curry in the number 1. It's interesting, this arrangement between Mark Beaver, the Beaver Motorsports team, and Vision Motorsports, which seems to just be Curry's efforts in the truck series, and Curry's runs in Toyota. Mark Beaver usually tends to field Chevrolets. This was, again, running the Toyota for Curry in the number 1, and it had Mark Beaver's font of the truck number on the doors. Looked very similar to what Travis Quapple's usually run in that truck. And, of course, in the race results, it says it's sponsored by Vision Motorsports, but it's owned still by Mark Beaver. An interesting arrangement there. Also, I have to give a big thanks to DNF Racers, who was visiting the Kansas Speedway this weekend. He sent some fantastic pictures. I'm going to be using some of those in the Truck Series article here. Looking at the number 1, One of the pictures he showed, actually, the Gander Outdoors logo on the #1 trucks was actually used with, it wasn't like the actual blue Gander Outdoors logo. It was actually placed with the same font as the driver name lettering on the back of the truck. It actually did like a black banner with Gander Outdoors spelled out that way. So he had an interesting shot of that. Very close to being the last place finisher of this race had Joey Gase not had to park the damaged truck there without completing a lap, and that issue there. So Gase, Curry, Hill, Austin Wayne, Self, and TJ Bell rounding out your bottom 5 in the truck series. That article is pretty much done. I'm going to finish that up with editing some pictures and get that back up there. And that would be an interesting situation there. Let's take our look at the rest of the results here. Angela Ruck getting a good 16th place run in the number 44 again, another Al Neese effort, although running the same truck that she also fielded with Nemco Motorsports not too long ago. Let's see. Beyond that, it's unfortunate to see Joe Nemechek out with a vibration after 59 laps. I'm not sure if that was a start and park effort or if it was a legitimate issue with that in the number 8. Obviously, with the change there in John Hunter committing more to the Xfinity Series, as Joe mentioned to me at Phoenix just last year, they're looking to kind of get some new drivers in there and make him a star and get some decent funding there to help them out. They definitely have the know-how and the expertise there to put some great trucks together, and even with limited funding, pull off a victory from here and there. Joe Nemechek certainly not a stranger to team ownership in NASCAR in the top 3 series, actually fielding entries in all 3 series at one point or another, both his and the Cup Series during the doldrums after the economic collapse in 2009. The Xfinity Series for many years, beating Dale Earnhardt at New Hampshire years ago, and now the Truck Series with his son and now himself in there, him and the number 87 in the race. Hopefully things turn around for the number 8 team, but again, 24th and 28th in the finishing order, and 30 trucks in the race. We mentioned the short entry list there and the number of teams trying to get back into the race to build up that list. It still resulted in the first short field for the Truck Series since Talladega in 2017. They had 31 trucks, and Norm Benning was the last place finisher in that one. The Truck Series has come close to having short fields several times, but always finding a way to get full fields in there. Couldn't quite accomplish that this time after, although if we didn't get the last-minute withdrawals, both the number 7 and the number 30, both of Corbin Forrester and Brendan Poole, it would have been a different story, but that was not the case this time around. So on the Truck Series side there, again, fantastic run for Ross Chastain, and a different story there for the small teams. And yeah, I'm looking at your comment there, Andrew Hayes. Yeah, about the start and park teams. It was interesting looking at pit road and seeing situations like that where you had some teams that didn't have a very big pit box or didn't have much of one, or didn't have any tires set up in their pit stall. It's always interesting to look up and down pit road and just see what the different teams bring up. I mean, not everybody has the really big setup with TV screens and canopies and seats for people like VIPs to sit behind there. That's really the exception rather than the rule now is kind of that. I mean, you have some teams are kind of in the middle there where you have some pit boxes, but they don't really have any room for VIPs or TVs or anything. And then you have even lower funded efforts, especially in the Xfinity Series, where you had a situation there with that. You think back to 2010, I think back to looking at Prism Motorsports pit boxes coming in there. I believe that was a really interesting one because you had Prism was actually going to enter 2 different cars. Michael Waltrip was going to run a car that was like one of the fan design paint schemes. It was going to be all like pink and purple, and it had a lot of crazy stuff in there, much like Kevin Harvick's millennial car is going to come out in the All-Star race next week. Waltrip ended up not qualifying, but Dave Blaney did, and what was their start and park number 66. And so they ended up putting a lot of the equipment from 55 on the 66. I bring this up because I remember seeing his pit box in there, and it had the number 55 on it from Prism, but they just put some strips of orange tape over the 5s to make them look like 6s. I thought it was interesting that they would take the time to do that, just to show that it was their pit box and not somebody else's. Yeah. So yeah, in 2012 was really the peak there. That's always the lost season to me too. I think that was a time where you had that period there between the dominance of Jimmy Johnson as the Cup Series champion and the introduction of the Gen 6 in 2013. It was kind of a weird situation there with the last year with the old cars, and then Brad Keselowski pulling off that championship that year last year for Dodge. But yeah, definitely a lot of start and part teams that season. I mean, I think about R3 Motorsports and Jay Robinson's team was coming in at that point again, or at least coming back into the Cup Series. He made several limited efforts running the 49, but had the America Israel Racing team or Robinson Blakeney Racing effort with J.J. Ailey driving for him. That team ended up collapsing by mid-season and focusing more on the Xfinity and Truck Series. And of course, we've now seen Robinson have an even bigger feature in the Cup Series. You mentioned Ross Chastain, his Cup Series effort. And I got to say, kudos to the Fox sports teams to mention his Cup Series ride as well as a context for his Truck Series win the other night. It was good to see the 15 get a little bit more attention in the results there today, or at least in the broadcast today. So we'll see what happens with that. Let me take another look here. Okay, we now have the results refreshed on the Cup Series page. It does show engine problems for Matt Benedetto, and it does show that the 95 was the only car to not finish the race under power. Cody Ware, the last car running, and multiple laps down in that regard. We're getting the results refreshed here. Yeah, Robinson attempted Cup there, but there's also one time I'd done some looking at the Cup Series in 2004, and he was actually one of the many teams that was trying to get into Cup in 2004 at Rockingham, back when they had the first economic crash there, and a lot of these teams couldn't get out there. Robinson actually had a car that he entered at Rockingham and withdrew, but you're correct. Yeah, I believe 2012 may have actually been the actual time that was the first time he'd actually fielded a car and actually had to qualify for the race there. I remember other times where Mike Wallace was driving for him, but I guess that was in the Gen 6. That must have been after. But yeah, the 49 car, definitely a fixture in the Xfinity Series. Let me take another look here. Let's take another look here. Just looking at some more traffic here as we continue to wait for results from inspection. We get a look at the time here. We are coming up on the 1 hour mark since when the race wrapped up. So we should be getting to a point here pretty soon. Let's see. And it looks like just seeing interviews from both Clint Boyer and Alex Bowman on the page here right now. Still no information yet on inspection results, so we'll still be in a holding pattern on this. It's interesting also that, both their last place finishers were basically last minute driver changes. It was originally going to be Jeb Burton in the number 51, which, as a user did point out, was the reason that Burton's face was still shown on the race view scanner there during the race, even though it showed Ware's name next to it. Although the driver change came together much, it's like it became to be much sooner with Ware actually practicing and qualifying the car versus the situation between Jennifer Jo Cobb and Joey Gase on the Truck Series side. So situation with that. Let's see. But yeah, this makes me want to definitely do some more Truck Series races and kind of learn more about some of these small teams out there. I'm really interested in the Bailey Curry, Mark Beaver / Vision Motorsports effort there. It seems like they're doing something, maybe an in-house arrangement there between the two different operations and running the same number to help out on owner points. Although owner points are kind of moot when you have not that many cars to actually qualify for the races. Yeah, still not seeing anything on this one. So we're going to take another look here. Yeah, the 2004 Rockingham race, that's a race that always, I wish that was one I had covered. If I could go back in time, if I had the ability to check that out, that would have been a really fascinating one because on top of, although it wasn't talked about that much, it's really hard to get a lot of information about it. Those start and park and underfunded efforts that apparently were not, but were also called by NASCAR to come out and fill the fields. That's really the big story. So I was looking at some information about that and a lot of these drivers and teams out there and what they were able to do. But yeah, I did see that Jay Robinson figured in there. I believe it was the number 39 car he was trying to run that year, and he wouldn't have been able to run the 49 because Ken Schrader was running for BAM Racing back then, so that's why they had the number change. Yeah. Whew. Let's see. It's getting a little warm in here. Let me get. Check out everything in here. So, oh, okay, nothing new on that. Nothing new on here. I still haven't caught up on the finish of the IndyCar race today. I know this isn't Indy Chat. I'll default to our open-wheeled friends on YouTube for talking about that stuff. But I watched part of it there the midway through, and I like that the rain was coming in and out. It's reminded me of some of those races at Montreal. I think that should be good. I think I've still watched, I believe, the last 31 laps of that. I was coming up here to the family's place after cleaning up some stuff over back at home. But it seemed to be a good race so far. I've not been a big fan of splitting up the Indy week between the Indy Grand Prix and the Indy 500, although it should be pretty good. Also going to make their debut on the main NBC station. Okay, good for them. I'll definitely have to catch up on that and see what happened. It's on my playlist here in the meantime. Let's see. Yeah, we're very much coming up on the final part here. About 30 minutes from possible results for inspection. We're not quite there yet. As I mentioned in the previous episodes of this, we're not going to be doing a show, disqualification show for next week's race in the All-Star weekend. What I'm going to do, unless the race gets rain delayed, if the race does get rain delayed till Sunday, I may still do a disqualification show for that. I'm not sure what the protocol is going to be for that race, it being a non-points event, but I'm sure it's going to be something similar to that. But we're going to do, of course, do the one for the 600 there because we'll have a lot of big stories for that. That'll be another Under the Lights episode like this one here, and cover what was happening in the Cup Series as well as the Xfinity race that weekend. Yes, that's right. Yeah, 2004 was we had Klaus Groff in the number 59 car. That was another one we ran over at the Sonoma Raceway. They had some good runs there. And you mentioned, yeah, that the 2010 Daytona 500, I think that was one where David Gilliland was trying to run the number 49. I believe there was a picture that somebody posted a while back of Robbie Gordon's store of cars. And one of the cars that he had on the racks out there was actually the number 49 that Gilliland attempted in like BAM Racing's last start. So that's where that shell of the car at least ended up. I'm not sure if it was the full chassis or anything. It looked like he had kind of this Fast and Furious grid of cars set up there of his old Dodges and everything. Of course, that became out of date once the Gen 6 and the came in and the Dodge pulled out, which would be definitely an interesting thing to check out. Let's see. Just looking over some of the other comments here to kind of make sure we get everything else crossed up here. But yeah, we talked about Alex Bowman. Yeah, the 1-800 call ATT scheme. That was a great paint scheme. I mean, it was definitely one that would stand out really well. Say what you will or won't about Carrot Top, but I mean, if you're gonna do that on the hood of the 49 car, or even before that in the Angie Petrie days, Mike Wallace, I remember running at the 33. 33 had a lot of great paint jobs. I mean, not just you talk about the Skull Bandit as being one of the most iconic paint schemes. I think even under Andy Petrie and some of the sponsorships they had on that car, I don't believe they ever had a bad paint scheme. You think about the Oakwood Homes cars that Joe Nemechek ran over those years. I remember there was ones like Preen and Autoleave. You had a couple weird sponsors on there, and by like 2002, 2003, thereabouts. Um, and by '03, they were very much scaled back, and Paul Menard made one of his first starts or first attempts driving at Sears Point there. Those were good. Yeah, another experimental race in the All-Star race is going to make the All-Star interesting again, not knowing what's going to happen versus a year ago when we saw them again, kind of do something very similar to the package that we're seeing in the mile and a halves this year. That's going to be interesting. So we'll see what happens on there. Taking another look here. I'm just going to keep the floor open here. If you guys have any other questions on what's going on or anything you want us to talk about here. We talked about Mike Mittler. We talked about the Truck Series race. We talked about the Cup Series race. Again, a lot of positives to take from this weekend going forward into Charlotte. It seems like Charlotte, of all the other tracks, is the one that's really been a challenge in terms of getting actual green flag passes for the lead and competition out there, especially when the field kind of gets strung out. So we'll see if things turn around on that. For those of you who didn't know, on Twitter, I am able to confirm again that the 2019 NASCAR trackside coverage will begin at the Sonoma Raceway next month. I got my credentials confirmed for that weekend, so I'm very much looking forward to that. And as we posted on there, they are going to be using as very much as close as they can to the old 1997 configuration of Turn 7. If you look closely, and something I didn't realize until actually looking at some pictures there, I knew that there were two exits of the corner because they had that extra little bump out where the cars would kind of raise the right sides up and get around that corner. But there's also two entrances to the corner, both the drag strip, which most of the drag strip is separated off by a concrete barrier on the front straightaway, which makes that a lot narrower, but also an exit. The exit of the carousel, the proper exit, actually has a little bit of a dog leg. It goes out wider, so the turn 7 corner is a little bit wider. So they are going to use that wider entrance as well as the narrower exit, not going around the full bump out at about 2001 or 2000, I believe it was 2000 or 2001 there when they reconfigured the end of the chute. So that should be interesting to see. So that should be good to see. And we'll start with the Sonoma Raceway, both the K&N series as well as the Cup series there that weekend. So that should be exciting. Looking at your comment there, Andrew. Yeah, looking at single car qualifying, I did get a chance to watch it. I thought it was fantastic. It went by really quick. I really enjoyed hearing the broadcasters have things to say about the different teams, even if it's just a moment where they just talk about how many starts they had or what their sponsor is, or just giving them some valuable TV time, because there's so many broadcasts, even tonight. A lot of people we talked about, just don't get shown at all. Although, some of the teams get lapped. I mean, you're going to see them, a decent number of times. The 46 and the 66, it seemed like we saw them a fair number of times in the broadcast tonight. It's unfortunate they didn't have any hood sponsors on the cars, although the quarter panels of the 46, they had a backer on there. So that was good to see. Running the boot at Watkins Glen, that would be interesting. I've only been to Watkins Glen just the one time last year, but the thing I was most marveled by at that track is just how huge that place is. Everything is it is absolutely flat out and just daring you to not run off course and just dive into these corners as fast as you can. It shows one way on TV, but it shows something very different in person, and I was very impressed by that. The difference in speed really is tremendous between both Watkins Glen and Sears Point. Sears Point is very much like a rally race. A lot of places you can get into trouble, slower speeds, but closer action and bumping people off the track and everything like that. And that's going to be even more of an issue going into the carousel, where you got to sweep into it downhill and avoid the tire barriers and the runoff in that section of the track. But at Watkins Glen, the guardrails are just everywhere, and it's so narrow. And I tried to picture that as best I can in writing the book on JD McDuffie. It was very hard to picture because my frame of reference again has been Sears Point and the slower speeds, and getting a little closer to the action. In Watkins Glen, it's almost like a cage match. You have these the catch fence in the inner loop, for example, is just mammoth. I mean, they put it's not even like flagpoles. These are like columns that are setting up the catch fence there for anything that comes through there. And I know they got sports car racing and a lot of other disciplines through there, but you have a big fence there. You have another huge fence in the old turn 5 from before. Before that, a lot less runoff. Everything paved over there. Very different from when you had big grass runoffs from years ago. Very interesting track. The scale of the place is huge. It takes forever to actually walk around that place. Not that that's unpleasant to do. It's actually a very nice walk around there. The campgrounds are really nice. You got people that are like right up next to the track surface, which is interesting. Sears Point is very much, you have a lot of opportunities to put campers on like higher parts overlooking the track, especially in the S's going into turn 7, as well as the top part of the track in turn 3 going down into the, well, a little bit more restricted now because some of that is going to be not as usable because you're going to actually pull into, before you get into the old turn 4 and the entrance to the chute, you're actually going to go into the carousel that way. A very different setup there. But yeah, Watkins Glen is a very interesting track. It's very different from Sears Point, as we all know, but the scale of the place, you can see where, you know, if you don't have like, you know, one of those race views, or you don't have like one of the big TV screens on there, it's very hard to get a grasp of what's happening most parts of the track there. But really not a bad seat there. Very much like Sears Point. I don't think there's a bad seat there either. I think there are some that are better than others. I've not been a big fan of the front stretch stands there. I think the old front stretch stands in the infield would be interesting. And I've actually had a good thought on that, talking about this a while back. I think a thing that would be, with all these tracks trying different things with their seating arrangements, I think one thing that would be great. The only problem with Sears Point is that it's very difficult to see turn 11. And it's strange because when you watch on the broadcast, they show turn 11 quite a lot and you think it's pretty visible. But if you look at a lot of those shots, there's no stands in turn 11. What that area is a hospitality area for the folks at Save Mart. And, you know, we're very appreciative of them, of course, because they've been the title sponsor for the race since 1992, the first year that I'd happened to have been out there. But it would be nice if there were some stands there, or at least a large burn or like hill that people could sit on to see that, because that's the iconic corner of that track. I mean, that's a shot you see in everything, you know, from there. Much like you look at, like, you know, turn 1 at Watkins Glen, or, you know, people funneling down from there. I think some kind of an arrangement with that would be interesting. The difficulty is that right behind that hospitality area is also the entrance to the track. They have a large gate there, and I believe about 4 entrances. So they need to have that to get the haulers in and out. So the arrangement there is a little tight. Luckily, the headquarters for the track are up on a hill behind that, so you don't need a whole lot of area for that. But it would be interesting if they had kind of a setup for that. You know, and then return to having like the main grandstands in the middle there. So it's like you have, because I think one of the greatest experiences that I always think about at Sears Point is the sensation of the cars coming from behind you and then looking to your left, and you see them go into turn 11, and it's like it is like they're literally shot out of a cannon. They seem like they're going way too fast into that corner. Watching them lock up the brakes, turn around, and then come right at you. It seems they're coming at you at about an angle, maybe about 45 degrees to you, but they're coming right towards you, and then they just pull away at the last second and swoop through into turn 1. That whole complex there, I think if Sears Point's looking at doing some things like returning back to the carousel that they are this year, I think that's something else that I would hope they would consider, is taking out that separation between the drag strip and the road course, and allowing them that extra room to kind of really throw the car into that extra runoff, and then try to get an even faster entrance to turn 1. They've created kind of a choke point there where you have to approach that so much slower than you used to, and I've never really been a big fan of that. Although it's still hazardous. I mean, that's where Casey Kane had his accident a couple of years ago. Look at your comment there, Andrew Hayes. I didn't know about that, about some of the stands from Nazareth being used in Watkins Glen. I've never heard anything about that. I know it's really sad about what's happened to that track, how overgrown it is, and you know, a sad thing to happen to such a unique and crazy track there in the Xfinity Series. Yeah, that's the first I'm hearing about that, but that's interesting. I always like to hear little things about where things come from and where they're going. Let's see. Oh, you're asking about how many laps in the race? Not 110 laps, Anthony. It's going to be 90 laps this year. They're originally saying 85 laps. That's since been changed to 90 laps. So it's going to be a different length from the old races. That's going to be a big difference from before, because actually back in 97, back to 89, they would do 74 laps. So yes, 90 laps, 90 this time around are going to be the number of laps at the Sonoma Raceway. And I believe it's going to be 50 laps for the K&N race, which is more or less the number of laps that they had for the old Southwest Tour races that they used to run back when we had that old configuration. So that was the report that I had heard. Yeah, again, big thanks to the folks at the Sonoma Raceway for having us on to help cover that event, and for also answering my question the other day about what Turn 7 configuration is going to be. I think that's going to make a really interesting competition out there. So we'll see what happens on that front. Let's take another look again. Okay, we are about 20 minutes away from a possible call here in inspection, although I'm looking at, there's another message on Pockrass's page. Let me take another look here. No, nothing else on here. Eric Jones, 5 minutes ago, from a video posted on Pockrass's page, Eric Jones said he felt Brad Keselowski did slightly jump the restart, but he was not expecting a call. So an unfortunate situation there for the number 20 team, but still a good finish for Eric Jones. It seems like Jones is kind of this driver that doesn't get a whole lot of attention for the good performances he's had. And it's easy to forget that he still won Daytona last July. As crazy as that race was, somebody had to take the victory there. But Eric Jones having a solid start to the season. He was right up there at the end of the 500, surviving all those accidents and having a good run. And last year, again, his good luck charm seemed to be running that gray Toyota paint scheme. I know when we saw him at Watkins Glen, he defended a top 5 finish very efficiently in that race. At Indianapolis, he had a great run. He duped Hamlin into getting a good finish there, trying to chase down Keselowski at the end. And then, of course, winning the July race at Daytona in between all of that. Running the DeWalt scheme tonight, still having a good finish there in Kansas. And should be interesting to see what he does going forward in the All-Star race and in the 600 beyond that. Let me see. Still showing Cody Ware in the last spot here. And Joey Gase on the Truck Series side. Let me see. I hope you guys still like the last card on infographics we're starting to do on the Twitter page. We started doing those at Talladega. I do want to make that a weekly feature. I'm still kind of working on that with the logos and everything. Again, as I mentioned in past shows, we've got a good graphic package going where they don't take quite as long to produce. So I'd like to be able to produce more of those. I think that, especially on the social media, is a good way to kind of break down some of these statistics rather than me writing them out. I'm so used to writing them out and finding other synonyms for last, so I don't say last since the last time he finished last, and it just sounds ridiculous. But that's another thing to look at. Yeah, Sears Point Raceway, that should be the name that they should bring back. It seems like their compromise at Sonoma is to use their 50th anniversary logo, where it's very much using the old Sears Point logo that I always remember from the mid-90s, the white S, the red drag strip through the S on a black background, and refashioning that into a 5 in the 50 and making that their logo. I mean, it's a nice compromise at least, but yeah, I too would like to see them just go back to calling it Sears Point. I know I'm calling it Sonoma a lot in this video tonight, but I like to call it Sears Point. And I wonder if I should do that for the starting grid video that I'm going to be doing. And I did announce that the other day. Thanks to the donations to our first patrons that we reached our first goal last month. And we are going to be doing a starting grid video for the Toyota Safe Mart 350 at Sonoma/Sears Point. I have some interesting stuff set up for that. I wasn't originally going to do an opening for that, but I kind of have I did some research on some of the old races on the old configuration. I think I might throw together something on that. It might not be as complicated as some of the past ones. We did a lot of greatest moments montages, including the one that was played at the Sonoma Raceway back in 2013. I may do something a little different this time and just kind of do a lead-in for that. I haven't recorded that yet, but I want to kind of work on that in advance just in case things pick up. things have been kind of a state of flux here over at Last Car headquarters. We're kind of looking at some different different things profession-wise and making ends meet here in the meantime. But but yeah, starting grid video coming back for the Sonoma Raceway. We're going to do that. If we hit the first goal level that we had on the Patreon page again, we'll do another starting grid later this year. We're well on that way, actually. We're about 30% up there. So if anybody's interested in joining our Patreon, definitely check that out. Patreon.com/LastCar on Brock. You can join for as little as $1 there on the levels. If you reach at least the $5 level and above, there's some swag that you can take back with you. We have some bumper stickers for the $5 levels. $10 level gets you loose die cast from my collection. Also, handwrite out a statistic about that car or car number or driver. And then at the $25 level, you get all that as well as a T-shirt with the 2019 sponsor logo on that. So exclusive stuff to check out. We'll have advanced access for videos that I've been doing with NASCAR Man and also some other graphics and other content on there. I may do something also with the next book I'm working on, and that is actually underway. Not ready to announce what the subject of that book is going to be, but I'm still thinking about how to approach making that announcement. There's a lot of hoops we have to jump through before we get close to that point. But once we do, I may do something with the Patreon as well. But the only way to know is to join the Patreon. So definitely give that a look. Any amount that you can help is absolutely fantastic. We do just a partial schedule, a few races a year. Our plan is still the Sonoma Raceway, and then jumping to Mo Sport in August to work out of market. And then we'd like to do the Phoenix and Texas double. That's still up in the air a little bit, but I'm hoping that that's going to still be possible. So that's where we are there. And then we look ahead to 2020 and some exciting stuff going forward. Let me look at the time again here. All right, so we're about an hour and 15 minutes into the wait. I see another post on Pockrace's page. Let's see if they have a call. We do not. We have the Cup playoff grid updated. It now shows Joey Logano officially or unofficially ahead of Kyle Busch in the point series standings by 9 points. That penalty by Kyle at the end there, that tire smoke had immediate consequences for him there. But of course, the seeding by wins is a whole different scenario. So Kyle Busch with his 3 wins there, Keselowski with 3 wins, Hamlin with 2, Truex with 2, Logano with 1, and Logano having just the 1 win, but getting right up there. That's a fantastic sign there of just how they've been performing. Kevin Harvick 3rd overall in points, and he still doesn't have a win. Going through another race where he won it last year and not winning it. Could very well be he comes back in the 600 where he finished last for the first time in his career in this race last year and spanks the field and finally gets back into this. If he does, he's already 3rd overall in points, and that's going to lead Progham past quite a bit of his competition. So obviously the seeding from wins is going to change things a little bit, but that's a lot of jumps or a lot of spots we have to jump through before we actually get to that point. Let's see. Still no calls here. Let me check the Twitter feed here. Let's see. Alex Bowman's tweeted now has 2,500 likes on there, talking about his disappointment of not quite pulling off the victory today. Keselowski still waving the American flag there after his victory and following up his run at Atlanta back in the spring. Good to see Kyle Larson very quietly have a decent night. Again, in and out of the top 10 for most of the evening. A turnaround that he has had less publicized than Alex Bowman's. Certainly, getting through the race at Dover and now getting through the race at Kansas. It's unfortunate that that's now the mark that he's having to look at here. His teammate Kurt Busch's performance seems to have cooled off a little bit. Although, still getting some decent runs. A 7th place finish. It seems like he was more of a top 5 driver in the first few rounds. He's kind of settled back to being more of a top 10 guy. Not a big disappointment, though. He's still very good in the points and going to be one to watch going forward. And perhaps maybe something will happen there at the 600 for him. Hard to say, but, that'll be interesting. But excuse me. Should be interesting going ahead. It's only 9:18 over here on the West Coast. I apologize. Some of you guys, I know it's past midnight over there. Appreciate you bearing with me. We got 6 people in the chat here so far, and thank you for following along with us here. We're still going to be waiting for results from inspection. Nothing has come up quite yet. Still following up on this. Again, a happy Mother's Day weekend to all of you out there. Again, spending time with the family here this weekend. Let's take another look here. Not seeing anything from Progress's page. Let me check this notification on here. Yeah, I know a point of controversy is probably going to be Cody Ware in that finishing order, and if that had a role in Alex Bowman losing the lead to Keselowski. I posted earlier that I didn't believe it did. It looked like Keselowski already had that run by the time he got around Bowman. Bowman was running the inside line right on the apron where Ware was trying to stay out of the way. But unfortunately, again, on the front straightaway at that track, there's really no place to hide no matter where you are on these tracks. Maybe on the back stretch a bit more, but on the front stretch, when so many of these drivers are finding the fastest line to be right on that line, if not a little bit below it, that seemed to be where Ware was trying to go, but it unfortunately ended up being right where Bowman was coming up there. But Bowman had already pretty much been passed by the 2 by that point. He just slotted back in line, and the restart ultimately made that moot and gave him another opportunity to get back at him. So a different set of circumstances there. Let's see. Let me experiment with a couple of things here. Do we have... Okay, does it show? What's this? Okay, it's just timestamps on here. That's cool. I haven't really played around too much with this stream format on here. Let's see. This would probably be a better thing for me to do offline, but I'll go ahead and do it now while we're waiting for the results here. Again, anybody else has any other questions, I'd be happy to handle that here in the meantime. I'm just thinking about what would be a good approach for the LastCar.info graphic for this week. I'll probably do something with the open race. I think that would be an interesting race to look at and do a summary from there. We did the article a couple of years ago with Phil Duffy, calling him out of the blue, driving the number 96. I found the construction job that he's still working at now. And he picked the phone right up, and we were able to kind of talk for about 20 minutes about his run there in the Open in 1990. He actually used to drive the number 96 Buick, this brown car with gold numbers, and not a car that you would immediately recognize at most times there. But he ran a number of races on a part-time basis for a few years there. No relation to JD, but another one of these owner drivers that was just trying to get as many of the parts as they could from other teams that had closed down and make ends meet. I believe I did get that little bit of information from the JD book where, if I remember correctly, he was the one that went with JD to one of these team auctions there in 1991 and picked up some equipment there. That was a different deal there. That came from that interview, so that was interesting. Does this have the option where they can show what shows on my screen? I don't think it does. I know there's other programs that do this, but I'm just using the regular YouTube interface here, and I know people have a love-hate relationship with a lot of that. Let me see. What does that do? Add inserted. Okay, I don't know if I want to put an ad in there. Let's not do that. Can I undo that? I probably can. Probably if I click it again, it's just going to do it again. Okay. If an ad's popping up here, I apologize. I'm not trying to do that deliberately. I don't know what that does. It's not showing anything different on my screen. All right, let me leave that be because that's probably just going to junk that up. Let me see here. Not seeing anything new on the Progress page. We are still at a holding pattern. Any minute now, we should be receiving the results from technical inspection. Not expecting any issues, but of course we never do. Certainly could be an issue earlier in the day today when you had a lot of those pre-race technical issues, but nothing new on that front. Let me see. Again, really liking all these tributes to Mike Mittler on here. It just shows, Garrett Smithley just posted one that I retweeted on here. Another run that he had in the number 63 truck. Really cool to see. It's just unfortunate there with him. I hope that DJ Kopp is able to do something more with the 63 and get the truck back out there, but not hearing any new information on that. And again, the plan further ahead is to do the Truck Series standalone weekend there at Mosport at the end of August, along with the NASCAR Pinty Series. I don't know if the 63 is going to go north of the border that weekend, but if they do, that's something we'll definitely be keeping an eye out for. The number of people in the chat keeps showing up and disappearing on the screen, too. Looks like this thing is glitchy as heck. Let me check here. Looking at the top chat. We'll keep this on here. There we go. I think I've clicked every button in here. What does this do? Emojis. Okay, we don't really need that. Not seeing anything still on Pockrace's page here. We're still waiting for a call at any minute. So, let me take another look at my outline for the Truck Series article for this week. The preview article turned out to be a bigger challenge than I thought it would be. I try to keep up with the preview articles as best I can with driver and team changes, but sometimes you get a week like this where things change so quickly. I got most of them on there, but I didn't even notice Cody Ware being swapped in for Jeb Burton. I'd already forgotten that Burton was already on the preliminary entry list by the race. I saw Ware on the list and was just like, oh, okay, I guess he's driving it this weekend. But yeah, just on Thursday, I put that in there that he was Jeb Burton was going to be in there because I remember there was they were going to set the same lineup that they had at Richmond, where Jeb Burton was in the 51 and Bailey Curry was in the 52. That ended up changed slightly with them in there. Yes, the 66 series start for Ross Chastain when he won the race yesterday, and a different set of circumstances for Alex Bowman. Let me take a look on here. Alex Bowman, this was his 129th start today. Is that the Cup races already? Yeah, they've already posted the Cup results on here. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is interesting. I'm looking at the results from here. Prior to Talladega, Bowman hadn't finished better than 11th this entire season. He finished 11th at the Daytona 500 and 11th at Las Vegas. Hadn't even broken the top 10. And now 3 straight second-place finishes. Also hadn't led a lap in that stretch. And finished next to last at Phoenix. Finished 35th in that one. Very nearly could have been last article this year, as he was last year. Things turned around really well for him there, but that's what we're seeing here. 7 laps led at Talladega, 16 laps led at Dover, and then 63 laps led at Kansas. He's definitely headed in the right direction. You think back to Bowman in the Cup Series. You think back to his rookie season with BK Racing in 2014, driving alongside Ryan Truex. BK Racing biting off more than they could chew, much like Swan Racing did. I believe the same year or the year before, actually a couple of years before, when they no, it was the year before. It was 2013. That was when they had Parker Kligerman and who was that? It wasn't David Stremme. That was Cole Witt. Yeah, Cole Witt and Parker Kligerman. I mean, you start a team up and you try to get the best you can. Then you try to run 2 rookies at the same time. You're going to tear through a lot of equipment. And it's amazing that BK Racing was able to keep going with the struggles there. Looking at the 2014 results for Alex Bowman, starting off at the 23rd in the Daytona 500, 13th in the Daytona night race that year. It looks like that was his best run of the season, and finishing last at Talladega, completing one of the highest laps there. I remember that coming up in our last card on infographic back at Talladega. So that was a different set of circumstances there. There's a concert at Rockingham. Man, that would be pretty cool. Used to be a literal rock concert. A little bit of Fox Sports humor there. That would be that'd be something to see. I'm glad to see that the track is well enough that they're able to do that. That tells me at least that they're taking care of the place. I know we drove by them on the way to Darlington, and the entire parking area was all overgrown, if not with trees, just with like really high grass and weeds over there. You almost wouldn't know that anything was there except for a few of the signs alongside the road, showing different sections of the parking lot going by. Let me see. Yeah, the Dr. Pepper car. Does anybody remember that video that Alex Bowman did a couple of years ago where he was talking to fans in the infield and asking people if they knew who Alex Bowman was? There was a great picture of that where they had Bowman was talking to these people in the infield. He was wearing sunglasses and a hat and just talking to these people in plain clothes and asking us like, who do they know? Who knows who Alex Bowman is? Who knows this and all that? He was giving out Dr. Pepper to the one or two people who knew. He still is kind of a figure that seems to kind of blend in a little bit, but I think he's working that to his advantage. He's kind of snuck up on everybody. I know he snuck up on me here, and having this great run out of nowhere after again not being able to break the top 10 at all and not leading any laps. Now suddenly, he's really made something happen here. We'd seen that a little bit with Truex after breaking through with winning on the short track there at Richmond a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, good deal for them. Let's see. Still interested to see what kind of teams we get showing up for the Sprint Showdown this week. See, now I'm using the wrong name again. I guess the Monster Energy Open at Charlotte. That always used to be an interesting race where you could get like if you had a season like 1994 where you had just mammoth amounts of cars and teams entering the race, you would get like 30, 35 people running in that. And you really wouldn't know who would get into the race. And you get some teams that were just, you would hardly see at all. Maybe they attempted one or two races over the previous year. Back when James Hilton was around, he'd run his car out there, or your Phil Barthol's, your Trevor Boys, people like that out there. You just don't see that anymore. That's something that's kind of get lost in the showdown. Oh, hello. There is the 90-minute mark. And we should be expecting a result on the technical infractions, if any, at any moment now. Not seeing anything on Bob Pockrass's page, but that's the that would be interesting to see if we get some more of these small teams out there that kind of pop up. Yeah, everybody thinking that Bowman was a rookie last year. See how easily people forget, and that's really a consequence, I think, of a lot of these networks not showing as much of the field as they could. Oh, and that kind of brings up something too. Let's talk about Dave Moody and talking about how he thought it was charity that these networks would talk about smaller teams, like, as if their job is only to talk about like the first and second place drivers the entire night. I still take issue with that. I don't mean to give him a whole lot of attention because I know he seems to just enjoy being the lovely little storm cloud that he is in a lot of these radio broadcasts there. Yeah, I was kind of, I think, and again, we hit on this every single week, and I know it's exhausting talking about all this, and I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing about it from me, but as I now get on my soapbox here, there are so many amazing technical advancements in the sport. I mean, I could take this tablet out during the race and watch any car in the field and listen to their radio and all that, for as buggy and inconsistent as that program is and how sometimes it doesn't work at all, at least most of the time it works. And I could get that information whenever I want. If there's an issue with like the TV broadcast, are you telling me that they don't have access to this at the very least? Or they could have a bunch of people to keep track of these different teams? Do I need everybody tripping over each other to report on the exact same pit penalty or something like that? That's just ridiculous. I don't think it's charity to talk about small teams out there. As you see in the articles that we do on the website here, even if a driver has like the worst possible finish, if they lose a whole lot of laps and have mechanical issues, that's still something that's happening. And if you have a race where not much is happening, these are the things that you then talk about. A lot was talked about doing the run through the field and how NBC or ESPN would do it back then and run through as many of the cars as they could during a long green flag run. That was interesting. At least you got an update on as much of the field as possible. But you get the newer broadcasts are just lacking in that. And I know it's not practical to talk about them all the times. You can't do that. But just be a little bit more selective and not just turn this into like a reaction channel where you're just like trying to hype up things. I think that's where the urge to have like the closer racing through the aero package is one situation there versus just making the most out of green flag racing and talking about these other teams. If you have a situation like that, it's much like the urge for group qualifying, and now we've gone back to single car qualifying because there was nothing wrong with it to begin with. Maybe we're going to get to that situation with the aero package. I'm seeing in the chat here. Looks like, yeah, we have no issues according to Sir Wrinklestein. So let's take another look here at Pockrace's page. That could be where it is. Yes. So posted 2 minutes ago, we do have a call indeed. Bob Pockrace posting the tech is done. Brad Keselowski is the winner. Keselowski and Hoof each had one loose lug nut, so both in the front and the back of the field. One loose lug nut. Chase Elliott's car is back to R&D, so that gets sent back after having a good run in the race and gets shuffled back in the field. Chase Elliott sent back to research and development. So we're going to go ahead and call it right here. 90 minutes complete there in that. So again, thank you everyone for watching. Had a long haul here, but a fantastic weekend of racing, I would say, both in the Truck Series and the Cup Series. A little bit of controversy, a little bit of success, a little bit of overcoming adversity for a lot of the big teams and the small teams there. And yeah, good to see. Congratulations to Ross Chastain. Alex Bowman is knocking on the door here in the meantime. Good run for congratulations to Brad Keselowski as well. And yeah, see you in a couple weeks here, and we'll see you back for the Coca-Cola 600. Have a great Mother's Day weekend. Enjoy All-Star Weekend, and we'll be back for the Coca-Cola 600 and sum up the weekend. That should be very exciting. Memorial Day at the end of this month. So thank you again for tuning in. LastCard.info, the website, patreon.com/LastCardOnBrock for more goodies. Check all that stuff out, and we'll be back at the end of the month.